Welcome back to the daily Kitzur Shulchan Aruch Living Jewish class. We are up to section 53 of the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. Today we will learn about the brachos made on soups and juices and other fruit and vegetable extracts. Just to see where we are in general, we're in the section on brachos, and we are now learning section 53. Halachos of soups and the brachos made on soups and juices, and let's take a look straight at the Shulchan Aruch. So he says like this: when fruits and vegetables are squeezed and juice extracted from them, the bracha to be made is shahakol. Shahakol is what you would make on any foods other than fruits and vegetables. Even though you're having a cup of orange juice or apple juice or lemonade, whatever it is, the bracha is not the same of the fruit. The same is true of honey that is extracted from dates. Why? Because the only juice that is called by the fruit itself is wine and olive oil. Wine is highly regarded a special bracha b'yer pri hagafen. Since wine is highly regarded, it has a special bracha b'yer pri hagafen. And olive oil is also held in high esteem, and therefore if you make an olive oil drink, which means if you're going to just drink pure olive oil, then you won't make any bracha at all, because that's not really edible. But if you mix the olive oil with a little bit of some other contents, maybe a bit of, I'm not sure, whatever else you'd mix in maybe a bit of water, I don't know, lemon or sugar, whatever it is, and you turn it into an olive oil drink, then you would make the bracha b'yer pri ha'etz. So the idea of this halacha is that when the rabbis instituted the brachos on food, they instituted the brachos on food as the food is in its ideal state. That's a general theme we've mentioned on a number of occasions. And most fruits and vegetables are planted to be eaten themselves. As opposed to if you're going to eat the peel, we've mentioned that that's downgraded. And similarly, if you're going to drink the extract of that fruit or vegetable, then that's not considered, doesn't have the halachic specialty of the bracha that was designated for fruits and vegetables. And therefore, on a cup of orange juice or apple juice or any juice, the bracha that would be made would be shahakol niyah b'dvarai. The truth is that there's room to argue that orange juice should be b'yer pri ha'etz. Why? Because when you're buying Tropicana orange juice in the States, or I don't know how exactly fresh orange juice is produced in South Africa, but Tropicana have their own orange farms with oranges that are, the trees are being planted for the purpose of orange juice. So there's room to argue that if the reason the tree was planted was for the juice, then maybe the juice is what that tree is about, so therefore such juice, there would be room to say would be b'yer pri ha'etz. However, the rabbis already stated clearly that all fruit and vegetable extracts, their juices are only like any other food, shahakol niyah b'dvarai, and the only exceptions to those are wine and olive oil when it is drinking as a drink together, when it's made into a proper drinkable drink. So that's the first idea. If you are squeezing a cup of orange juice, then the bracha on the juice will not be b'yer pri ha'etz, it will be shahakol niyah b'dvarai. It won't be the special bracha for fruits, but the bracha made on all other foods. Halacha number 2. When you cook fruits that are usually eaten in their raw state, then the liquid in which they were cooked is shahakol, the source of the fruits or vegetable. However, fruits which are usually dried first and then cooked, if they are plentiful and also grown for that purpose, because if there's drought and people, not sure, it seems like there wouldn't be, I'm not sure exactly what that means if there is drought, but any fruits that are usually cooked, that are commonly cooked, any fruits that are commonly planted, or vegetables that are commonly planted in order to be cooked. So then we have three possibilities. I'll first go through it outside and then we can look at it quickly inside. If you cooked the fruit with the intention of eating both the fruit and its liquids, which would basically be a vegetable soup. You cooked your zucchini and or maybe tomato and whatever else you put into your vegetable soup, your pumpkins, you cooked it all with the intention of both eating the vegetable and eating the liquid that it's being cooked in. So if when you cooked it both for the vegetable and the water that it was cooked inside of, then the water that it's cooked in is considered an extension of the food or vegetable itself. And so even if you only have the water it was cooked in, the bracha would be that of the food or vegetable, ha'etz ha'adama. So it's an interesting phenomenon. If you take a tomato and you squeeze out the liquid of the tomato and you squeeze out some tomato juice, so the bracha would be shahakol. I mean, if there's still the seeds there, that's probably still considered like food and it would be our AIDS. But if you just squeezed out tomato juice and then you strained it and all you were left with was liquid, the bracha would be shahakol. But if you cook the tomatoes and you're intending on eating both the tomato and the tomato soup, then the water that tomatoes were cooked in becomes an extension of the tomatoes, and you would be able to make a hadama both on the tomato and on the liquids. Except I'm just thinking that if tomatoes are usually not cooked, then maybe when they cook they become downgraded. So maybe I need to be using another example. But the idea is that any fruit or vegetable that's cooked, if you cook it in order to eat it and the water that it's cooked in, then both it and the water it's cooked in have its bracha of Bayra Priya Eitz or Bayra Priya Adama, the bracha made on fruits or vegetables. If you cooked it with the intention of only eating the liquid, but you planned on actually discarding or giving away the item that it's being cooked in, so then the bracha would be shahakol, because it's got to be about the vegetable in order for its bracha to extend to its waters. Okay, let's see that inside. A little complicated, but I hope that I've made it a little clearer. When you cook fruits that are usually eaten in their raw state, then you would say shahakol, as we said previously. However, fruits which are usually dried first and then cooked, if they are plentiful and also grown for that purpose, this is the halacha. If they were cooked in order to eat the fruit and to drink the juice, so you cooked that pumpkin both to eat the pumpkin and to eat you cooked the butternut both to eat the butternut and to eat the butternut soup, then you would say the bracha, Bayra Priya Eitz on a fruit or adama on a vegetable, even if you're just eating the juice alone. Legumes and vegetables which are eaten after they are cooked, when the soup is also eaten, this is the halacha over the soup, you say the bracha Bayra Priya Adama even though you don't eat the solid food, because you cook them to eat them both. Now the brackets, he asks, why is it that when we squeeze fruits and vegetables, the liquids that come from them is shahakol, as opposed to when we cook them, that it still retains its bracha? And he gives two possible explanations. Either it could be because that's not the way it's usually made, but that's questionable. Or it could be because actually the water in which a vegetable is cooked will actually have more of the taste of the vegetable than the liquids that you squeeze out of that vegetable, which is an interesting phenomenon. So juice that you squeeze out of a tomato won't taste as tomatoey as water that you cook the tomato in. Obviously that's up for debate. But the fact of the matter is that juices that are squeezed out of fruits and vegetables are shahakol, but soups, meaning water in which they were cooked, if they were cooked in order to eat both from the vegetable and the liquids, so then the water actually has the bracha of the food or vegetable, which would be ha'etz adama. But if they are only cooked for the sake of the fruit or the vegetables, and you do not intend on having the juice, so you're not making a butternut soup, you're just making baranat. You're just cooking baranat. Then, if you do not eat any of the fruit of the vegetables and only the juice, so after you've cooked your baranat, you've decided to drink the water in which the baranat was cooked, but you did not intend on making it into a soup, then that water is not considered an extension of the baranat, and the bracha would be shehakol. If you're making a soup and a chicken soup, so you're making a chicken soup and you're putting in some zucchini, some baby marrows, some baranat, so then the liquid of that soup will always be shehakol, because it's not, you can't say it's just it's an extension of the vegetables, because it's clearly also, it's called the chicken soup. The chicken it takes a primary role. So the moment you add chicken or meat or whatever it is to that soup, then that water would certainly not have the bracha of the fruits or vegetables. Rather, it would have the bracha set on water or on meat on chicken, which would be shehakol. This until now was if you cooked the fruits or vegetables in order to eat them with their liquids. If you didn't cook them, you merely soaked them. So he says if you soak or cook fruits exclusively for the sake of their juice, then again the bracha would be shehakol. So we have three possibilities. Either you cooked it to eat both the fruit or vegetable and the water, which would be like a vegetable soup, in which case everything becomes ha'etz ha'adama. Or you cooked it to eat only the vegetable, in which case the bracha on the water, if you decide to drink it, you change your mind, will be shehakol. Or if you cooked it only to eat the liquid, so you planned on making a soup, but not by blending the actual vegetable, but rather just by straining it, then that liquid would be shehakol. So I guess to summarize it very simply, it means that when you're cooking a vegetable, if you plan on eating them both, then both the vegetable and the water have the bracha ha'adama. If you only intend on eating one of the two, either only the water or only the vegetable, then the bracha on the liquid would be shehakol. However, he'll mention, if you planned on cooking it only to eat the vegetable, and you made a bracha on the vegetable, and now you want to drink the liquid as well, there's a question whether you need to make a bracha or not, and so you should try to avoid that phenomena. Yes, it is a little bit confusing, but I'm trying to make it as clear as I could. So if you the bracha you should say over coffee or tea is shehakol. Why? Because you don't actually eat the tea leaves; they just give the flavor, and the coffee is dissolved. Also over beer, whether made from dates or from barley, the bracha would be shehakol and not the bracha of dates or barley, because there it's being made for the liquid. It's not being made for the barley. That was all if it's cooked. If they weren't cooked, but they were only pickled or preserved in water, and now you decide to drink that pickle juice, so that certainly would never take on the bracha of that which it was pickling. Rather, the bracha would be shehakol. So if you're having some pickles and you decide to drink the pickle juice, then that would not have the bracha of adama, but it would have the bracha on, like any other water, which would be shehakol. Even though it has the same flavor, this idea of the bracha extending from the fruit or vegetable to the liquid is something that can only happen through the process of cooking. But if you first ate the vegetables and then decided to drink the juice, so you first ate a pickle and then you decided to drink the pickle juice, then it's a question whether that juice is considered secondary to the pickle or not, or whether the bracha would work, and therefore you should avoid drinking pickle juice after eating a pickle, unless you're going to have something separate to make the bracha shehakol on, and then the pickle juice will be covered regardless. If its bracha is adama, it would have been covered by the bracha you made on the pickle, and if the bracha is shehakol, it would have been covered by the shehakol you made on the sweet or chocolate or whatever it was that you were eating that had the bracha shehakol, the mushroom. Likewise, fruits, vegetables, legumes, and the like, which are cooked in a liquid that has a taste of its own. So, like, let's say maybe in vinegar, borscht, milk. So that's, you would always make the bracha shehakol. So if you're making some kind of stew, the general principle is that the only time you would make a ha'adama on the liquid is if the vegetable or fruit was cooked with the liquid with the intention of eating them both. Again, but if you ate the fruit and now you want to eat the liquid in which it was cooked, there's a question whether it requires its own bracha or not. So you would have to either avoid drinking its liquid or make a separate bracha that covers it as well. Here's an interesting one on raisins. Some raisins have so much juice that when they are pressed, juice will ooze out. This is raisin juice. If they were crushed and soaked in water for the purpose of making a beverage out of them, and not for eating the raisins, and they were soaked for 3 days and began to ferment, and after 3 days the liquid is poured into another vessel, such liquid is considered wine, and its bracha would be Borei Pri Hagafen. So raisin wine, that would be. And the after bracha would be the special 3-faceted bracha, which one makes after drinking grape juice or wine. On all occasions when a cup of wine is required, so once you make a bracha on the cup of wine, it covers you for all other drinks. So this is a practical one. If you hear Kiddush on Shabbos and you hear Borei Pri Hagafen and you actually drink some of the grape juice, or you make Kiddush, anytime you make a bracha on grape juice Borei Pri Hagafen, or you include it in a bracha on grape juice Borei Pri Hagafen, then that covers all other drinks. So you would not need to make a bracha on any other drink. Just like once you made Hagafen, just like when you make Hamotzi Lechem and Haaretz on bread, that covers all other meal food. Similarly, when you make a Borei Pri Hagafen, it covers all other beverages as well. But again, going back to the raisins, you would need to make sure that the raisins comprise more than 1/6 part of the water. Meaning if there's more than 5 times as much water as there is what's coming out of the raisin, then at that point it wouldn't be considered raisin wine, it would rather just be considered raisin flavored water. Now when you estimate the volume of the raisins, consider them as though they were fresh before they were dried. These guidelines only apply to wine made by soaking raisins as indicated above. But if the raisins were boiled in water, the boiling does not turn them into wine. Soaking or boiling the raisins for the purpose of eating the raisins as well raises many questions as to the proper bracha to be said. And that brings us to the end of section 53. Quite confusing, but one more time to sum it all up. Fruit juices or vegetable juices, the bracha on them would not be that of the fruit of the vegetable, but rather shahakol, with the exception of wine and olive oil that is prepared into a drink. And soups. If you made the soup with the intention of eating both the vegetable and the liquid, which would be the case of a vegetable soup, then you would just make a hadama. Even if all you're doing is you're eating the water of that soup, you would still make the hadama. It's all considered an extension of the vegetable. In all other scenarios, water was in which vegetables were cooked. If you were cooking them only for the vegetables and not for the water, or only for the water and not for the vegetables, or if it was pickled, all other scenarios of water that's associated with vegetables, the water is considered water, it's not considered a vegetable, and it would require its own bracha of shahakol. And the one final law at the end, which is quite straightforward, is whenever you make a bracha on grape juice or wine, that covers all other